Okay, navigators, I have a daily digest episode for you today that I am super excited about because we are covering some news and updates from OpenAI and Microsoft's Copilot that are pushing us towards a higher AI adoption future. And we've talked about on this show before how I think the higher and greater adoption that AI sees across more of the population that might not be as tech savvy or quick to adopt tech, the better it's going to be for, first of all, humanity as a whole, as far as AI and the benefits of AI go, but also for businesses and in particular us as marketers. And that's what we're all about on this show is AI and marketers. So let's get into it. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the AI Marketing Navigator. This is your daily compass in the ever-evolving world of AI marketing. Okay, navigators, I have a daily digest episode for you today that I am super excited about because we are covering some news and updates from OpenAI and Microsoft's Copilot that are pushing us towards a higher AI adoption future. And we've talked about on this show before how I think the higher and greater adoption that AI sees across more of the population that might not be as tech savvy or quick to adopt tech, the better it's going to be for, first of all, humanity as a whole, as far as AI and the benefits of AI go, but also for businesses and in particular us as marketers. And that's what we're all about on this show is AI and marketers. So let's get into it. Yesterday, October 1st, was Dev Day San Francisco for OpenAI, essentially a conference where they announced a bunch of new capabilities, particularly with the API that is available to developers. The more access that developers have to the capabilities of OpenAI through this API, the more use cases and applications we're going to see for users on a day-to-day basis, leading to that greater adoption that I think is so important. And the big news was the introduction of the real-time API, which is what is powering ChatGPT's advanced voice mode. Essentially, it's the part of the technology that allows developers to build speech-to-speech experiences, which is going to be so huge. We've talked about, again, previously on this show, that the more we can interact with AI tools and applications in a human-natured way, i.e. using natural language, the easier it's going to be for us to adopt it and the more natural it's going to be. So the fact that this is being made available to developers to use is probably the biggest deal out of Dev Day from OpenAI. They also announced things like prompt caching, which is essentially a way for developers to save money and performance by reusing input tokens or the data that they're inputting to the model. They introduced something as well called model distillation, which is, in fancy terms, it's a workflow to fine-tune models for your specific use cases that are going to be smaller and more directly applicable to what you need them to do than a traditional model would, making them more cost efficient. Another cost efficiency improvement for developers, making it easier and more affordable for them to make their applications. And in the vein of fine-tuning, or speaking of fine-tuning, which again, for anybody who might not quite know what that means or doesn't really understand what that means, it's basically taking a model and quote unquote fine-tuning it to a particular use case or a particular set of tasks, training it with a very particular specific set of data and specific goal in mind. You can think of it just like special training basically for the model. So now in the GPT 4.0 model or tier, you can fine tune your models using images as input. So some vision capabilities being added to the API fine tuning capabilities. It also says here in this Twitter post where I'm pulling these updates from, that the training or vision fine tuning will be free until October 31st. So for the developers out there, get in and start developing if you happen to be using the OpenAI API. This next one here I think is really cool, and it's what they call playground features, new playground features. And in the playground, you can automatically generate prompts and valid schemas for functions and structured outputs. So essentially, you can tell it what you're trying to use the model for. So if you're a developer or a marketer trying to build a tool, a free tool, you can tell it what you're trying to use the model for, and it will help you generate prompts or schemas to use in your development, in your backend. And I think this is super powerful for developers and for anybody who's trying to crack into building with these AI tools. And then lastly here, this one is definitely for the developers in the audience, if there are any, and I hope there are. the rate limits for the OpenAI o1 API, so the advanced reasoning model of the API, have increased. Now they are the same limits as GPT-4o, apparently. So definitely check out the link to this thread in the show notes to get the details about those requests per minute and those rate limits. We'll spare the non-developers or the non-technical listeners that today. Okay, so we've covered the OpenAI updates for developers, which I wanted to include on the show today because, as we mentioned, they're going to make this wave of AI applications that are coming our way in the next year or two that much bigger and hopefully that much more useful, leading to greater AI adoption. So there we have increased adoption for the masses, for the day-to-day users. I'm also going to cover next here in the announcements, or excuse me, in this episode, the announcements from Microsoft and the improvements to their Copilot, which, yes, I think it will affect day-to-day users, but I think it'll more affect business teams and people who are using AI day-to-day in business senses, because it's going to affect those who are using the Microsoft 365 suite of tools the most. And I know there are some personal users of those tools as well, obviously, but I think it's more widely adopted in businesses. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Anyway, I'm pulling these updates from a blog post that I will also link in the show notes. Definitely check it out. The first feature that they are announcing as part of Copilot's next phase, as they call it here, is, big surprise, voice. So voice has been all the talk of the AI town right now with the OpenAI advanced voice mode. We just talked about the real-time API being made available, which is what powers that voice mode. Well, here comes Copilot and Microsoft with their voice as well. Apparently, in this case, there will be 4 voices to choose from, but you'll be able to now interact with Copilot using natural language, which is a huge deal. Using this voice feature, they are also announcing Copilot Daily. And I really like this. Essentially, this is going to be your little morning assistant that gives you a summary of things like the news, the weather, recent updates with your schedule, and reminders of what's coming up for the day. Copilot Daily is going to be, like I said, your little virtual assistant to help in that streamlining or preparing for a day that we all have to do. And I think it would be awesome. I'm definitely tempted into switching over to Microsoft again with these Copilot announcements. I think I did an episode not too long ago where I questioned, should I switch to Microsoft 365? And this is making me think that again. And apologies if we're picking up some background noise from some construction going on outside. Well, if not, then good. I guess my very, very non-studio like studio here is doing okay at dampening sounds, or at least my tech stack and my microphone here are doing okay. But again, if you're hearing that, my apologies. Anyway, moving on. This next one here I think is huge, and that's the fact that they are adding Copilot to Microsoft Edge. So in the Edge browser, Copilot can now literally browse right along with you. It's going to be able to summarize the page content that you're looking at, help you translate text, answer questions contextually about the page content, all that. And I think it's just super powerful. And man, you guys, I'm just so hyped on what these small integrations into daily life of AI could do for AI adoption, and so hopeful for what it could mean, not only for the way we work, of course, but the way that we all live. Okay, this next one is also big for a lot of reasons, and that is called Copilot Vision. We talked about the fact that vision usually means the ability to intake visual media content as input, and that's essentially what they're talking about here. But instead of just images, it appears that it's taking in the content of your screen as a whole, much like Copilot in Microsoft Edge was doing specifically for the Edge browser. Copilot Vision does for your entire screen, as I understand it. And check out the blog post yourself. Of course, they have links to some videos demoing this stuff and further detail as well. So anyway, they give an example here of Copilot Vision helping you try to furnish a new apartment, for instance. It can first help you search for the furniture based on the color palettes that would work for you. It can help you find the right color palette. It'll think through your options on everything from rugs to throws that might match the vibe or match the style that you're going for. It can suggest ways to arrange it in the room, based on what you're looking at, all that stuff, according to the post here. So I believe this is also actually a version of a feature that they called Recall, Copilot Recall, and I'm pulling that from today's rundown.ai newsletter. Recall was a super controversial feature because it was meant to kind of give you a photographic memory, as it's put. It would take screenshots of your screen and help you find those images or screenshots in the future by searching using natural language. And this was somewhat controversial just because basically it's AI constantly monitoring the contents of your screen and taking a huge and insanely high amount of screen captures or screenshots. Anyway, so they're bringing that back in concept, at least, with this Copilot vision. And so they go through here all the reasons that safety and security have been their top priority, or all of the ways that they've made safety and security their top priority for vision. For instance, it's entirely opt-in and ephemeral, quote unquote, they say. Basically, none of the data or images that you grab or snag, or that the vision grabs or snags, are going to be kept or stored, according to the blog post here. So I'm not entirely sure how it actually is useful if they're not being kept or stored. Anyway, worth a little bit of a deeper dive, or especially if you're a 365 user, and definitely check out the blog post. They give a couple video examples of these features as well, and they also go through the way that Copilot Vision is meant to be secure. So, for instance, paywalled and sensitive content aren't going to be able to be viewed or captured with Vision, etc. Things like that. Lastly, in the blog post, there's a big section about quote unquote think deeper, which is the feature or concept in which they're actually pulling in OpenAI's O1 model, the ChatGPT O1 model, to perform that deeper reasoning. As they say here, Copilot can now reason through more complex questions. And they describe how it's going to take longer to answer your questions, just identical to what we know about O1. And they go through a bunch of features, and the goals of this think deeper rollout. And it says that it's not only for Copilot, but it's meant for the entire Microsoft PC and Windows experience across Bing and Edge and stuff like that. So I was just super pumped and super hyped to read these updates and read this news from OpenAI and Microsoft. Shout out to the Rundown.ai newsletter, as always, for curating all this great information. Today's episode was all about these pushes towards AI adoption, and of course, what that means for us as marketers, as AI marketing becomes more prevalent and more impactful, as more and more people are interacting with AI technology, but also as a society. And as you all know, if you've listened to the show before, I like to go on tangents and geek out and nerd out on the actual deeply science fiction things that are becoming way too realistic and way too possible with the power of AI. Okay, that does it for today's episode. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful in any way, please do me a favor and follow on Spotify or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. A review on top of that would be even more appreciated and is so super helpful to the show. So until next time, and as always, thanks for joining me, and remember to stay curious, stay consistent, and keep navigating forward. Bye.